Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, for 1 year as we learn from Venerable Fulton Sheen, one of the greatest Catholic teachers in modern times. Join me, Amy Thomas, once a week for a short reading out of Bishop Sheen's book, Way to Inner Peace. We are back, Catholic pilgrims, for week 2 of our readings from Venerable Fulton Sheen's book, Way to Inner Peace. And I'm telling you, this week, it could be a week where some feathers are ruffled. I have a feeling that might happen, possibly, hopefully not. I do encourage you to read this with me with an open mind and a remembrance that Venerable Fulton Sheen is trying to lead us to Christ, not to the ways of the world, but to Christ's ways. If you can keep that in mind, I think we can roll with this number that we're reading this week and learn a lot from it. So the number today that we're reading is called Trials of Our Own Making. And the 3 points that I think you should probably pay attention to are the words fantasy, reality, manufactured woes. Let's get started. An educator was once asked by a mother of a child of 5 years of age at what age she should begin educating her child. His answer was that it is already 5 years too late. This may be an exaggeration, but the best informed opinions are that the 2 ages which are most important in the education of the young are the ages between 3 and 4 for psychological development and the beginning of the teens for ethical development. The age of 3 or 4 is important because at this age, self-consciousness begins. The child makes a clear distinction between itself and its environment, between his actions and the reaction it receives from the outside world. It is also the age when the child sees itself, looks at itself as in a mirror, reflects, and comes to some conclusion as to whether the world is easy or hard. Many parents today are encouraging their children to believe that they are the smartest kids in school, that nothing they do is wrong, that if they had the opportunity to be on television like some of those other lucky kids, they would be 1,000 times better. The result is that when they grow up, they are full of false fantasies about their presumed superiority. If they do not succeed in business later on, it is because someone was prejudiced or jealous of them. If they become painters and anyone criticizes their work, they go into a rage. Their best friends are those who tolerate them, while they have nothing but disdain for those who do not flatter and praise them. Their fantasy is taken for reality, the false for the true. Those who are pampered during youth thus retain a delusion of grandeur during life and are very subject to physical and mental breakdowns. The breakdown is psychologically induced, though they are very unconscious of it. The breakdown is for the sake of the preservation of the fantasy. Some will develop muscular pains and sickness in order to avoid the test of their greatness. Then they can say, "If it were not for being bedridden, I would have written the best novel of the day." The bubble of his fantasy would be pricked if he had to abandon the pretense of being so great. So he stays sick to prevent the test. From the spiritual point of view, the basic trouble with such people is pride, egotism, and selfishness. Their complexes are due to a great extent to a want of practice of the virtue of humility. They have developed the wrong treasures, and therefore the heart is in the wrong place. As our blessed Lord said, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." It makes little difference whether we possess the treasure or not. What matters is that we love it. In this case, the treasure is the exalted opinion we have of self, or having our own will satisfied. If this be the treasure, then all the affections, desires, and feelings we have intertwine about our ego. Our real good is that which we work most earnestly to preserve, and which saddens us most when we lose it. Hence the frequency with which we praise ourselves because of the money we made or the oil wells we dug. As the sunflower turns toward the sun, the magnetic needle to the pole star, so the egoist turns to his fantasy. Such persons are really still infants, for the characteristic note of an infant is that it wants everything it sees and it cries when it does not get it. By constantly seeking pleasure of self, the tone has been ruined. So many of our cares today are of our own making. Never before were there so many woes manufactured by our own hands. Made by me and made within could be stamped on most of the trials and difficulties that people endure. God gives us the strength to bear the sorrows of our own. Those who make their own trials are also those who never call upon Him for aid. Those who have sorrows laid on them by God always do. The serpents that sting us are from within and not without. We carry them in our own bosom. This is the tragedy. When the earthly treasures are swept away, those who trust in God have everything left. I haven't read through this whole book yet, but my goodness, we could just stop here because honestly, I think this number that we read here today sums up everything that is going wrong in our world today. And like I said, I believe that this number here that we read, Trials of Our Own Making, could ruffle a few feathers because in our effort to get along with everybody in the world and try to be super tolerant of everybody, we have allowed for fantasy to take over reality. And in the process of that, people have become miserable because you really cannot have inner peace if you do not live in reality. It's just impossible. God is truth, reality is real, and we have to live in it, whether it's hard or not. We can never have peace if we live in a fantasy world. And so what is this fantasy? I want to go back to the first part on page 7. He says, most parents today are encouraging their children to believe that they are the smartest kids in school, that nothing they do is wrong. Now, when I was growing up, I sure got in trouble if I disobeyed authority. If the teacher or the principal or coach or anybody called my parents and said, Amy is acting up, I was quickly brought in for an explanation as to why I disobeyed. I was asked what happened. And if I really did disobey, I got in trouble. My parents did not have this idea of Amy can never do wrong. Everybody else in the world is wrong. My little precious daughter can never do anything wrong. Now, there were times when I wasn't in the wrong and my parents did listen to me, but I also knew my place and that I needed to respect authority and that I wasn't the best thing on earth since sliced bread. But that's not how things are today. The way things are today is kids are not only encouraged to defy authority, but it's completely and utterly acceptable because everybody's kid is the most perfect and they do nothing wrong. And we've told our kids this. You can be whatever you want to be. Now that sounds nice, but it's not true. It's not true. I can't be everything I want to be. I just can't. For one thing, I can't be an airline pilot. I have really bad eyes. I could never join the Air Force and be a pilot because my eyes are bad. So telling a kid that they can be anything they want to be is not true. There are some limitations. Not everybody has certain talents. Not everybody has the capabilities to just do anything that they put their mind to. Now, that doesn't mean we should discourage our kids and tell them that they can't do anything, but we need to have realistic hopes so that when failures come or setbacks come, our kids realize and recognize that this is just a part of life, that you may have to find another path. This may not be your path. And that doesn't mean that your life is over. But this is what we've done. We've told kids you can be whatever you want to be. And now we're telling them you can be whoever you want to be. And we allow them to live in this fantasy world. And so the difficult thing is that when kids get out into the world, and deep down they know it. They know that they can't really be anything in the world. And deep down, kids also know that they can't just be whoever they want to be. But because we've told them that and we've allowed kids to live in this fantasy world where they just get to make up who they are, decide what gender they are, decide, that they have no gender at all, or that they want to travel down this path even though it may not be good for them. We've told them that all of this is okay. Deep down, they know it's not. And they get out in the world and they don't have any peace because they're fighting against reality. And so they're not happy and they don't know how to handle it. And so what do? They create more exotic ways to inflate the self and make themselves get more attention. That's what TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and all of those social media things do, is they inflate the self. And it's a constant battle to be better than the next person and to say something so outrageous that it gets people's attention. The next thing I want to move to is on the next page, where he says, their best friends are those who tolerate them, while they have nothing but disdain for those who do not flatter and praise them. Their fantasy is taken for reality, the false for the true. And this is what has happened today. If anybody tries to present reality to people, then there is utter disdain for anyone who disagrees. You will get canceled and called names and told that you're hateful. And even from Christians, you'll be told that you're so unloving and you're not being Christ-like. And it kills me because we have created Christ to be this man who just tolerates everything. God is truth. Christ is God, so Christ is truth. And in our world today, Christ even accepts fantasy and untruths. And people just go along with it because we don't have the courage to stand up and speak truth. And so what has happened? We have all these different ways of shutting people down because we don't want to hear that our fantasy is not reality. We don't want to hear that we aren't the best thing in the world. We don't want to hear that we can't just create ourselves into whatever we want to be. And so we'll say, oh, these are microaggressions, or, oh, you're triggering me. I can't stand this. You're triggering me. Or, I need a safe space because I don't like what you're saying and it's attacking me. Then we have name calling and canceling people and all these things. And all of these are very immature ways of shutting down discussion because we can't handle the truth. We can't handle the reality of our lives. And so we do not want to hear anybody tell us what could possibly be true. And once they start, it's like people put their fingers in their ear and just, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear this. And so then you're shut down and nobody wants to listen to you. A great example of this is one time I had written something about abortion. And whenever I do, I will usually get a lot of pro-abortion people coming onto my site. And this one particular time, I had this young Black woman come on and she was attacking me about what I had said. And she was telling me that I was wrong and that I was, not for Black people and what am I doing to help Black people? And so what I did was I took a quote from an older Black woman who was talking about how the number one thing that is threatening the Black community is abortion, because even in New York City, more Black babies are aborted than are brought to full term and allowed to live. And so that's a great threat. And I quoted this woman and I, put it up there for her to see. And she immediately said I was being microaggressive and how dare I, and she was super triggered, and the whole conversation just shut down. And the reason is because she didn't want to hear what I had to say, because she was so wedded to her stance that the murder of the unborn is an okay thing to do. And so she just wanted to shut me down by saying that I was being racist and attacking her. And I wasn't. I was showing her how this is really hurting the Black community and it's horrific. And she didn't want to hear it because she wanted to live in the fantasy world. The last thing I want to cover is on page 9. He says, so many of our cares today are of our own making. Never before were there so many woes manufactured by our own hands. Made by me and made within could be stamped on most of the trials and difficulties that people endure. And that is such a true statement. If you think back into the not so distant past, a lot of the woes that people had to deal with were very external. They had to deal with natural disasters, and they hadn't quite yet developed ways to, live with the disasters. Today we can kind of detect if an earthquake is going to happen or a volcano. We can chart hurricanes. We can, usually let people know if there's going to be a tornado, but it wasn't that way for a long period of time. People had to, work very hard for their food. A lot of people lived hand to mouth. Other people had to worry about, countries coming in and completely invading. We still have to worry about this today, but not to the extent that people used to have to deal with this kind of thing. And there was just so many things externally that they had to deal with that were real woes, real struggles and burdens and difficulties that come with living in a fallen world. A lot of those things, yes, we still have to deal with them on some level, but we have advanced a lot. And so not to the degree that people in the past had to deal with them. But today, so many of our problems are manufactured woes, and a lot of it comes because of our unwillingness to face reality. Because reality can be hard. Reality is full of suffering. Reality involves, dealing with, unpleasant things. And because we don't want to do that and we don't want to face ourselves, we create this fantasy world. I mean, just look at what's going on right now with Facebook. There's the metaverse. The real world is too difficult to live in, so come into the metaverse where you put on your virtual reality goggles and you walk around with your avatar in this metaverse in a world that is not unpleasant. Everything's good. Everything's fine. Everything's going to be okay in the metaverse because the real world is too hard to deal with. Ugh, that just sounds hideous to me. But it is happening because people can't handle the reality of the real world. So now we need to create a fantasy world that people live in. Why do people like video games so much? Because it's a fantasy world that you can enter into. And I feel like those things are very dangerous. And so, this chapter is extremely prophetic. And it's something that we need to hear. There is a lot of unrest. All these people living in fantasy worlds and not accepting reality. If that were the way to go, we would expect to find lots of peace and harmony. Depression rates would drop, suicide rates would drop, mental health would be not an issue. But that's not the case. We're actually seeing those rates go way high, way high. And it's because when you don't face reality and you don't learn how to deal with it, and you can't accept failure, and you can't accept the reality of your life, then you're going to not have any inner peace. You're just not, because you can't fight between the two. You can't try to live in reality, but have this fantasy world on the side, and then try to force everybody else to live in your fantasy world. It just will not bring inner peace. And we are doing a disservice to people when we encourage them in this. It's not loving. It's not loving at all. In fact, it's very unloving to encourage people to live in a fantasy world and not tell them the reality of how things are, because they can't ever get any better, and they will just create more exotic ways of living and bigger fantasies in order to insulate themselves. And in the end, it will be completely self-destructive. So have the courage, Catholic pilgrims, have the courage to speak truth with charity, have the courage to, live in reality and encourage others to do the same. If we really love people, we want to encourage them to live in reality, and we'll be right there with them. If times are hard for them, if they're struggling through something, we should be there with them during that very realistic time and not abandon them and treat them as if, maybe they aren't suffering. We should be there but we should also be speaking truth. And if Christ is truth, then we are called to speak the truth. So that is all for today, Catholic Pilgrims. I'll see you back here for week 3. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.